Hey, nobody's out there, right? Good. Just for the record, I don't really know totally what the fuck I'm talking about a lot of the time. I settled, nobody cares, but just for the record, this morning I was saying all this stuff about like I'm kind of tripping out about like, what's abstract thought versus concrete thought? And then like, how can you tell if you have an inclination towards abstract thought? Like if you don't like abstract thought, what are some things that you might do? Like what kind of, basically I asked ChatGPT, and I actually don't really like abstract thought. I tend to like concrete thought more. What's concrete thought? Concrete thought is basically like just dealing with like sensory information. So like somebody who's adverse to, according to ChatGPT, somebody who's adverse to abstract thought just wants just like when I say to my dad, like, what do I do? What do I do? My dad wants to tell me like, this is why you do all this stuff. I always just like say, okay, time out. I don't need all the details. Just what do I do? I just want like step-by-step stuff. Because I don't really like to think too much. Get to the point, Sean. I guess like math. I'm just trying to figure this out, but like math. I guess like none of these, like I don't perfectly fit into all of these. What am I talking about? This is all just silly stuff. I'm just exploring these kind of ideas. Basically, I just went to the dog park, and for like an hour, I was asking ChatGPT like what is I've heard all these terms over the course of my adult life, like logic versus emotion, and like logic is good but emotion is more fun or something like that. But like generally if somebody's acting logical, supposedly they're thinking more about like the consequences of what they're doing. But it's not clear cut. Like I still like it's weird to me, like the more I think about these terms, the more I'm always like, I don't even really know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like I've heard all these terms and I'm realizing I don't even really know what the fuck logic means. So logic basically is just can be summed up as like, if this then that. If this then that. If Sally is the name of a woman, then if that person's name is Sally, then they're a woman, right?
You've got the core.
So logic can just be thought of as like, this thing that I'm asserting, or this thing is dependent on some other thing, and so summoning up or referring this thing to some other thought is like basically logic, right? Like having some action or decision or conclusion be based off of something else that you know, right? Or that you know to be true or something like that, right?
You're definitely on the right track with that way of thinking about logic. You're describing the fundamental idea of dependence and reasoning from premises to conclusions. Let's break down your thoughts and refine them a bit. This thing that I'm...
Logic is about establishing dependencies between statements or ideas. It involves reasoning what you know premise to reach a new understanding, assertion. So yeah, you can say that logic is establishing dependencies between statements or ideas, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like, if this, then that, right?
Yes, the if this, then that structure is a very common and fundamental way to establish a
dependent conclusions or statements or actions. So it's about dependent conclusions, statements, intentions, actions, like getting those to be in accord with each other, right? Like having your actions be based off of some sort of prior knowledge that you know to be true, and that's kind of it, right?
Yes, you're articulate.
Can you give me a really simple explanation of what logic is? Logic can be very simply stated as, in a really simple sentence, in terms of its definition.
In a really simple sense, logic is about making sense of things by figuring out if one idea follows from another.
So one idea follows from another. So logic could be thought of as like basing your actions or just something that you're doing or positing or some idea off of another, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very clear and concise way to put it. Logic can definitely.
Or otherwise having a reason for doing something that you're doing or putting something somewhere.
Exactly. You've nailed it. Logic is fundamentally about having a.
But if that reason is just to satisfy an emotion, that usually doesn't count as like logical action. Is that right? Like if you're just like, it feels good, that's usually not what people refer to as logical thinking. Even though like, yeah, first of all, is that true?
You've hit on a very important distinction.
But if your reason for doing something is it makes me feel good and I want to feel good, then that could be a logical reason, right?
That's a really insightful point that gets to the heart of what we consider logical and the role of our goals and values. You're right to push on that. If your ultimate goal is to feel good, then choosing an action because it makes you feel good could be seen as logically consistent with that goal.
Yeah, so like if doing something for no reason makes you feel good, or just doing something that has like a bad outcome makes you feel good, it could still be logical. You're just saying it makes you feel good. Anyway, which point? I'm not trying to seem smart or something like that, but basically, I asked this. Nobody cares. It's just the record. I'm just thinking out loud. Nobody should watch this. I asked this thing. I asked ChatGPT. I said like, can you give me a little quiz? Can you give me a little quiz about like how to determine if I'm more of a concrete thinker or more of an abstract thinker? And I thought I was an abstract thinker, but actually I'm really not. I'm really like, I really do like concrete thought. Like, and I said like, what are some things that like somebody who's adverse to abstract thought might say? And they said one thing that like, if somebody says these things, they're probably adverse to abstract thought, is they might say, just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. And I always say that to my dad. I talk to my dad, I get really frustrated. I'm like, just stop with all the details. Like, what do I do? That's a frustration that a lot of people who are adverse to abstract thought say. So yeah, a lot of people who are adverse to abstract thought, they might say something like I don't need all the details or your explanation as to why. Just tell me step by step, what do I do? Right?
You've hit on a common communication.
So the answer to my previous question could be yes, right?
Yes, the answer to.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say that like I thought that I was like I thought like I really don't like abstract thought. I tend to like more concrete like stuff. Concrete. I like to deal with like things I can see and touch and do. And anyway, what's your point? So maybe I'm not so smart. Like I thought that I was like smart. Well, first of all, like a person's propensity for abstract thought doesn't necessarily indicate like an intelligence exclusively, right? Like you could be really adverse to abstract thought but still be smart somehow in other ways, right?
You are absolutely correct.
But like isn't like math, if you're doing math, isn't math essentially like abstract thought in like a pure form?
Yes, you've hit.
So like somebody's ability to do math like quickly in their head could indicate greater propensity towards abstract thought. Like they can sort of juggle, summon up, and deal with abstractions in their head without needing any without needing to count on their fingers or something like that, right?
Yes, that's a very insightful.
So if I have a tendency when I do math to kind of summon up sort of visualizations in my head, like if there's some weird fuzzy visualization of like 5 little entities in my head, if I'm doing subtraction or addition in my head, that could indicate a that I'm less adept at abstract thinking than somebody who doesn't necessarily do that. Could that be said to be true?
That's a very interesting question and a great piece.
I mean, could you say that people who are really adept at abstract thinking, particularly like doing math in their head, they don't even really need to visualize something in their head. They just can, their brain can somehow deal with abstractions without needing to see, even in their imagination, visual representations. Could that be said to be true? Yeah.
Yes, that could
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and say I thought that like before I was thinking like I'm an abstract thinker, but I think I'm not. I think I could probably even say that like nobody cares. But just for record, when I was in Silicon Valley, I went to San Jose State for graduate school, and Silicon Valley really, it's like the king of the nerd like world. Like they really favor people with a propensity to abstract thought, and they feel sorry for you if you seem stupid in the sense of not being able to be really good at abstract thought. And I remember like feeling kind of bullied. I remember there were times when I was in San Jose State in the Silicon Valley, and I got like a complex. I felt like bullied by people wielding their ability to do abstract thought, and I was like, I'll show you, I can do abstract thought too. And so I think that's a complex that I got, and really like I've probably been trying to compensate. What's my point? Well, first of all, basically, like I think I'm really not very good at abstract thought, and so I'm probably not even really like as smart. Propensity towards abstract thought and just like things like being able to do math really easily in your head can sort of be indicate a propensity towards better being able to do abstract thought at like a higher level, and like that sometimes is synonymous with whether or not somebody seems smart or not, right? Yeah, so
Yes.
So I'm really not that smart, and I bet you that so a place like Silicon Valley, California, probably really favors and canonizes people with a high propensity for abstract thought, right? Like just being able to do it like a really easy level, like being able to do it really easily in their head and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, nobody cares, but like just for the record, in the time that I was in Silicon Valley, I was really more into concrete thinking. In terms of like my painting, I was good at like basically I was good at copying. In art school, I was good at copying, which basically is like not drawing from imagination, needing visual information to work with. And even still today, like the art that I'm really good at is basically concrete. I'm like a good portrait painter, and I can copy shit really well. But in the time that I was in San Jose State, I found there's this animation program, animation illustration, where all these people were like really good at like drawing from imagination and like doing animation that had that, you know, they use like physics and framing and all this stuff. And I remember I got this complex about like, fuck, like I'm not good at abstract thought. And nobody cares, but just for record, I found that somehow drawing things in imagination, in perspective, where I kind of like had to analyze and break down the proportions and plot them out into a three-dimensional space, it required abstract thought in a way that felt really tiresome when I did it in my brain. But then the more that I did it, I sort of noticed like, oh, I can get like a little better at abstract thought. And I asked that too on ChatGPT. I said like, so like if you there's data to substantiate the idea that if you regularly practice activities that require abstract thought, like just doing math in your head or on paper, or just if this then that type activity, something where you have to juggle and retain and compare the answers or actions that you're providing to data that you've previously noted down. And if you do that, you can kind of get better at it throughout the day, or you can get more used to thinking in that way, right? Yeah.
Yes, there is definitely
So anyway, nobody cares, but just the record, I noticed that. I really remember that phenomenon. I remember that when I was basically like pretty much like so close to like 20 years ago, somewhere around like 20 years ago, I went to this animation program and I was really just into copying. And then they didn't copy. They actually had a rule against copying, and it was in the Silicon Valley, and everybody there was like a nerd. Like it was like they really loved nerds. Like you were looked down on if you were not good at abstract thought, and if you didn't practice abstract thought. And so I started to like learn how I practiced drawing things in perspective from imagination, and then doing like things like animation and illustration and stuff, where really good illustration that you do from your imagination, where especially the more things that you implement that have to be in accord with, like, there's a reason for everything that you do something. There's a reason for like why is the light shining on that particular spot. You have to like consider the perspective and then remember the perspective. So there's these like interdependent decision making things. You have to think, why does this go here, why does this go here? Basically when I would practice doing that regularly, I sort of like acted smarter. I throughout the rest of the day I tended to, before I would make an action or something, there would be like a little more of a thought of like, why am I doing that? What's your reason for doing that? And that sort of like improved my life. Now I want to notice if that but I'm not naturally into doing it. If I'm really lazy in my brain and stuff, and so by default I noticed basically like, I don't know, so I noticed this phenomenon where I used to just copy my paintings and illustrations just mostly using like concrete thought. I basically just mimicked without really thinking about like why something looked the way it did. And then I went to this animation program where you were supposed to draw things from imagination and really kind of like analyze the form that you're looking at, break it down into proportions, plot it down in different perspectives, and then like the thing that you were drawing, you had to think about like why you were putting the marks there. It was dependent on like the perspective, it was dependent upon the proportions of the anatomy, and the marks you were making were dependent upon like where's the light source coming from. So you had to like consider a bunch of factors before and there was like a correct place to put the marks based on those factors. And then I noticed that like if I practiced that regularly, I tended to think about what I was doing throughout the rest of the day in terms of like, why am I doing that? Like, don't just do something willy-nilly. Just put a little thought into like, well, why do it that way? What are the factors as to like why do that, and why do that at that time? So that's like a real phenomenon, right? People's brains tend to sort of work that way. Is that right? So like,
Absolutely.
so I really noticed that. I feel like I'm kind of like a lazy brain person who's kind of adverse to, I guess I'm a lazy brain person who's kind of adverse to abstract thought. I noticed that if I practice things where I had to like do things that were dependent on other factors, I had to think first and be like, all right, where's the perspective, where's this, then where's the right place to put the mark. Don't just do it willy-nilly. It sort of like made me think more about the stuff I was doing, and my life was a little less stupid, and I tended to sort of like be less emotional. Is there data to substantiate that if you do a lifestyle practice like that for like an hour or two, you might sort of think more about the things you do and tend to act less on emotion. Yeah.
Yes,
So anyway, like I don't totally how good it works, and I sort of nobody cares, but just a record in my stupid life, I sort of made it into like a religion to some degree. I had this religion where it's like I gotta draw perspective-y drawing. I can't just copy. I have to spend like a little time doing perspective drawing, analytical drawing, where you plot things down, you analyze the perspective, and you like transcribe it, and just like think about the anatomy, and even like color coding stuff. And it got kind of like obsessive, but I've had sort of like a religion about that, or it's like I notice if I do it, I didn't notice whether it was like superstition or like psychosomatic. Like I thought maybe this is just some silly ritual that I'm doing that isn't rooted in data, but it is rooted in data. Like there is data to say that like if you practice so it's not just some like superstition or my kooky nonsense reason for doing something in the morning. Like if I practice perspective drawing, where I'm having to analyze the proportions of what I'm observing and then think about it and put the marks down in the right position based on perspective, because I'm drawing the object at like a different angle. I'm being forced to practice abstract thinking before I make my marks, right? And that can translate over to like the rest of the day and make me like think more about why I'm doing what I'm doing throughout the day, and not base my decisions exclusively on emotion as much. There's data to substantiate that's like a way that my brain would work as a human, right? Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, I just noticed that. So just for the record, nobody really cares. This is just something I was really fascinated with in my lifetime, and it's kind of silly. I guess basically I'm just going to go ahead and say that like I benefit from being forced to practice some level of abstract thought, which I've practiced for years in just the form of perspective drawing, particularly perspective drawing where I'm analyzing something and plotting it down the right perspective, versus just doing something willy-nilly. And I noticed, at least in my 20s, I noticed a real clear phenomenon that when I did that, I started to sort of like be a little less stupid and a little less emotional. And so I still do it to this day, but like I guess in the process of doing that, sometimes I think to myself, I'm an abstract, but I'm really not. And I think sometimes, like I think when I was in that animation program and everybody was like on their way, a lot of the people I was with, they were really good at abstract thought, and they were on their way to like places like Pixar and like DreamWorks and all these prestigious companies. And there was a real distinct feeling in Silicon Valley that like you felt insecure. Like there was, you know how bullies look down on like wimpy people in the Silicon Valley in the Silicon Valley, California. There's a real distinct feeling like they look down on they look down on people who are just jocks and don't practice abstract thought. Like if you seem incapable or especially bad at abstract thought, a lot of people will just sneer at you. You're like, dude, you're totally in like the wrong environment. It's just the nerds, the really smart people are the cool people, and the jocks are kind of like, that's like secondary, not so important stuff. Anyway, so that sort of lingered with me for basically like 20 years. For like 20 years, I think I've had some sort of insecurity where I've been trying to demonstrate like I am capable of abstract thought. Look, I'm doing some like if this plus this, if this then this thinking. But really, like by nature, just for I'm the reason I'm trying to figure this out is because I'm trying to just be myself. I'm basically realizing that like I've been not necessarily intentionally, but for a lot of my life, and especially recently, I've been deluding myself. I've been misleading myself and others as to my natural strengths and abilities. I sort of am realizing that because basically like I've just been on live stream so long that like if I get off live stream, I realize like, oh yeah, like I don't even really like doing a lot of stuff that I've been showing off on here. And it's not good for me either, because it's kind of like, for one thing, if even regularly doing something that's not a strength of mine, nobody ever likes it because I'm not strong at it. I'm not really good at it. And then I'm never going to get a job at it. And so basically I'm just trying to like delete a lot of that stuff. And so I'm sort of learning about these little, nobody cares, but just, I'm learning about these little terms. Like, are you more of a, so yeah, you could say for most people, they tend to be more of a concrete thinker versus an abstract thinker. And, you know, just some people tend to be more logical. Some people tend to be more emotional. These are strengths and weaknesses people lean more towards. None of them are absolute. You know, all people probably have percentages of both polarities. But just for your own ability to live authentically, if you want to do that, it's good to sort of be honest with yourself at least, and possibly how you present yourself, like what your strengths and weaknesses are and things like that, right? Yeah.
Yes, you've articulated a very...
Anyway, I'm just kind of fascinated with this. I shouldn't waste a lot of time on this, but it's okay. I'm not like curing cancer or something. I'm just kind of tripping out of this. Nobody should watch this. But like, what are some so like these are spectrums, but like there are sort of polarities that are that can be valuable to understand which side you lean more towards, if you do lean more towards one side or the other. So like concrete thinking and abstract thinking is one polarity. In the creative world, there can be practical creativity versus conceptual creativity, and then there can be like somebody who's a man's man versus somebody who's more of a ladies' man. Like, just what are some more sort of like polarities on two sides of a spectrum, examples that some people might benefit from trying to figure out what side of the spectrum they tend more towards, if they do have a tendency more towards one side or the other. Another thing is like conservative or liberal. Can you just give me like 10 common examples of polarities that people might tend more towards one or the other? So like, okay, so these...
You're right. Understanding these tendencies can be incredibly helpful for self-awareness and navigating the world.
All right, so just for the record, no one should watch this. I've determined I'm really not good at like, nobody likes any of my fucking explanations. I don't even like listening to my own explanations. And I've been doing too much fucking talking and showing myself talking, and I just need to stop it because it's not really good. But even though it's not good, and I don't expect anybody to watch it like this, it's still a good way just to get myself to think some shit. But I don't know, I'm just kind of curious about this, like introversion or extroversion. If I had to think like, so like I could say like which side of the spectrum, definitely introversion. I definitely lean more toward introversion. Thinking versus feeling. When you prioritize logic, objectivity, or values. So I would say like I probably lean more towards feeling, if I'm really honest. And so I do, it's worth noting like, if I do lean more towards the other, sometimes like depending on, basically if some of these, it doesn't really matter for my life, I'm already sort of old and washed up, but if I had some sort of future, or if I had a job or something, it might be worth sort of telling which one you are, and then trying to figure out like, is it worth like doing some little activity to mitigate the weakness. I don't know, I'm just interested. Perceiving versus judging versus perceiving. Optimism versus pessimism, risk averse versus risk seeking, independent versus collaborative. I'm definitely more independent. Detail oriented versus big picture focus. So you always hear these things: traditional versus innovative, direct communication versus indirect communication, action oriented versus. So I don't know. Nobody cares. I was going to try to do 6 hours of 3D modeling, but I'm just curious. I'm curious because I want to tell like how much of these have I been bullshitting myself about, and then how much of these. What's my natural inclination? I don't even know, because I've been like doing a lot of shit that I'm not good at, trying to like fix weaknesses, but just like, can you give me like 3 sample questions to see if I'm more into thinking versus feeling, or maybe 5 questions, like 5 questions that have like answer A, answer B, or I don't know, just 3 questions. 3 questions where they have answer A versus answer B, and they indicate, are you more Do you have more of a propensity towards thinking versus feeling? All right, I'm just curious. I'm gonna waste a little time on this. It's
Okay, here are 3 scenarios with
I'm genuinely kind of interested in this. I'm interested in trying to become like, just for my own, I'm just curious, just to be authentic. Nobody should watch this stuff. You're part of a team making an important decision that will affect many people. The team is divided on the approach. You argue for the option that seems most logical, sound, and has the strongest. So if you're on a team, see, I'm really not even really good at reading comprehension. So basically, I'm not as smart as I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm not as smart as I sometimes fancy myself to be. That's definitely I am not as good at abstract and logical thought as I probably fancy myself to be. You are part of a team making an important decision that will affect many people. The team is divided on the best approach. A. You argue for the best option that seems most logically sound and has the strongest evidence to support its effectiveness, even if it might cause some discomfort or be unpopular with a few individuals. You advocate for the opinion that seems to consider the well-being and feelings of everyone involved the most, even if it might not be the best, most efficient data-driven solution. Yeah, I think I'd probably just do that. I'd probably do the second approach. Question 2: when giving feedback to a friend who has put a lot of effort into a project that ultimately didn't succeed, you focus on objectively analyzing what went wrong, pointing out the flaws in the approach, and suggesting more effective strategies for the future. You emphasize their effort and dedication, acknowledging their disappointment, and offering emotional support and encouragement. I'm not really sure which I would do. Question 3: in a debate or disagreement, you prioritize being right and ensuring your points are logically consistent and factually accurate, even if it means challenging examples. You prioritize maintaining harmony. Can you give me some shorter, simpler questions, and then with 2 options, and just like have the options be really simply like, what would you do? Okay, so a friend is upset about.
Okay, here are 5 short.
Nobody should watch this. A friend is upset about a decision you made that affected them. A. You explain your reasoning and logic behind your decision. 2. You focus on understanding their feelings and how your decision made them feel. I think I'd probably go for A. You are choosing a movie to watch with a group of friends. You suggest the movie that has the best reviews and seems the most intellectually stimulating. You suggest the movie that you think everyone will enjoy the most, even if it's not the highest rated. I'd probably do B. Or no. Intellectually stimulating. I would want the movie everyone I think would like the most. Or no, I'd probably go with the one that has the highest ratings and say this movie. So we're going to see a movie. Group of friends. There's a bunch of friends. I would want the movie that everybody's going to like the most. So I would go with B. You notice a rule at work seems inefficient and doesn't make logical sense. You point out the flaws in the rule and suggest a more logical outcome. You consider how changing the rule might affect people and whether it could cause any discomfort. B. Someone you know is sharing a problem with you. You offer practical advice and potential solutions to the problem. You listen empathetic and offer support and understanding. I would do A. So A, B, B, A. You are making a personal purchase. You carefully compare features, analyze specifications, and choose the option that is most rational and functional. You consider how the purchase will make you feel and choose the option that you emotionally connect with. So I would say in question 1, it's A, and then question 2 is B, question 3 is B, question 4 is A, and question 5 is B. What might that mean?
Based on your answers. Question 1.
So you value logic and reasoning when explaining your actions, when problem solving for others. This indicates a thinking aspect to your approach. You prioritize emotional well-being and enjoyment of others in social situations, and your own emotion connection when making personal choices. This highlights a stronger emphasis on feelings in these contexts. So feelings and context. So I tend to use logic more in my actions, except when it relates to people. If I'm dealing with people, I tend to to make more emotional decisions, like that are going to affect their emotions or my decisions. Does that seem like the what the data reflects so far?
Yes, that's a very consistent interpretation of your responses to the.
Yeah, I think people vary, right? But I would say like when dealing with people, I tend to be like, I don't want to piss anybody off or hurt anybody, and I don't want us to feel bad. But then if I'm trying to think about like decisions on what actions, what I want to do, I'm thinking like, what's the logical thing to do? Yeah, it's weird. People. Anyway, nobody should watch this. I'm just curious. So I'm mixed. I'm not like clearly thinking versus feeling. Both. Judging versus perceiving. How you prefer to approach the external world, with structure, planning, decisiveness, or flexibility, adaptiveness, and openness to new information. Optimism versus pessimism. Can you give me 3 simple questions to determine if I'm more judging versus feeling? And then can you give 3 simple questions to determine if I'm more detail-oriented versus big picture? And then 3 questions to determine if I'm more traditional versus innovative. Okay, question 1, judging versus perceiving. You have a free weekend coming up. You make a plan for how you'd like to spend your time, including specific activities and a rough schedule. You see what happens and decide what to do based on the mood and opportunities that arise. I don't know, I think a little of both. When working on a project with a deadline, you prefer to break the project down into smaller tasks with specific deadlines for each. You prefer to work more flexibly. I think probably 2. When faced with new situation, you gather as much information as possible up front and form a clear plan before acting. You prefer to jump in and learn as you go, adapting based on experiences. I think I do both. I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm probably even on a lot of these. Judging versus receiving, I think I'm even. I'm in the middle of the spectrum. Detail-oriented versus big picture. When reading a report on a document, you focus on understanding every specific detail, ensuring accuracy and thoroughness. You focus on grasping the main ideas and overall conclusions. I think that. Yeah. When explaining a complex topic to somebody, you tend to provide a lot of specific facts and step-by-step explanation. You tend to give a general overview of the key concepts. When working on a creative project, you enjoy focusing on the precise execution and refinement of small details. You enjoy brainstorming concepts and exploring different possibilities. Actually, A. So again, I think I'm kind of like both. I think I'm in the middle on like most stuff. Traditional versus innovative. When faced with a familiar problem, you tend to rely on methods and solutions that work well in the past. You are more inclined to look for new and potentially effective ways. Regarding social norms or customs, you generally believe it's important to respect and uphold established norms. You are more open to questioning and challenging traditional ways of doing things. It's both. I am kind of in the middle of the spectrum on most of these. But I'm just curious, like, if I wanted to tell if I'm more of a concrete thinker or more of an abstract thinker, can you give me like 5 questions in terms of like what would I do or what would I want to do out of 2 options to determine if I'm more concrete thinker or abstract thinker? When learning a new project, you prefer to start with real-world examples,
here are
practical
5.
applications, and hands-on activities. You prefer to begin with fundamental principles, theories, and overarching concepts. Probably A. When faced with complex problems, you tend to break it down to smaller, manageable steps with clear, tangible goals. You tend to think about the underlying systems. Definitely A. When considering new concept or idea, you want to know how it works in practice with the specific result it will produce. You are more interested in potential implications, broader connections, and theoretical principles. When considering a new idea or concept, you want to know how it works in practice and what specific results it will produce. You are more interested in potential implications, broader connections, and theoretical possibilities. Yeah, again, practice, what specific results is it going to do? When given instructions for a task, you prefer clear step-by-step instructions. Yeah, definitely A. When thinking about the future, you focus more on specific achievable goals and practical plans to reach them. You enjoy exploring different possibilities, imagining different scenarios, and considering the long-term implications. Yeah, I would answer A. Probably, I would probably answer A for almost all of those. So does that indicate leaning more towards, or a preference more towards concrete thinking rather than abstract thinking?
Yes, answering.
Yeah, so I'm just but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm adverse to abstract thought or incapable of abstract thought, but I tend to prefer concrete thought, right?
That's a.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think I'm just kind of lazy. I'm kind of lazy in the Department of Abstract Thought, and I definitely am not very good at like reading comprehension. What's the point, Sean? Basically, I think I'm not really as smart. I should make it clear to myself, and I'm not really that smart, and I think I'm probably even adverse to abstract thought because of a laziness. Could it be true that I might be adverse to excessive or unnecessary abstract thought, just in terms of like laziness? Like it tends to take more effort to do a lot of abstract thought versus than just basically thinking, what do I do? What's the practical application? Is that true? Could that be true?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm just kind of lazy, and so what's the point? So I just think that like a long time ago, I basically concluded that like left to my own devices, I'm pretty lazy and I'm pretty adverse to abstract thought, and so I do this thing where like I'll do a lot of things I do. I'm trying to like mitigate my weaknesses, and so I notice if I do like perspective-y drawing in from imagination, it forces me to do abstract thought. I also noticed that like my working memory isn't very good by default. I have like pretty bad auditory processing, and I'm pretty not terrible, but yeah, pretty bad auditory processing, and not very good working memory. And so I always do these activities in the morning where I'm trying to like compensate for that, just to not be all like ADD and stupid. Is a lot of abstract thought somewhat connected to having a good working memory? Like if you're pretty spacey, and like if you just woke up, or you have a feeling as though you just woke up, you might be adverse to a lot of abstract thought. Could that be said to be true?
Yes.
All right, so basically nobody cares, but I'm just trying to like, nobody cares, but just for record, I'm trying to sort of like get real and try to sort out like, all right, I've been live streaming for like 8 years, and just I've developed over the course of my adult life a lot of lifestyle things, which I don't even remember totally why I started doing them, and now I'm sort of basically like I'm trying to tell like, what am I doing to show off, and what am I doing just to be able to function. And so get the point. Basically, I'm trying to remind myself I'm not good at abstract thought, and I am more concrete thought. Basically, I have a tendency to be stupid, largely just because of laziness. Like my natural inclination is I'm just kind of lazy, especially like mentally lazy, and so I force myself to like overcome that. And if I force myself to overcome it, I can do some things that seem competent sometimes, but by default, I do have a pretty bad working memory, and so basically for many years now I've developed little ways to mitigate those things, and I shouldn't like mitigate all of my weaknesses, but basically what's the point? Basically I'm just basically trying to like get real, and I'm just saying like, yeah, I'm not super careful in the way that I think things out, and my not super careful in the way I think things out, and kind of spacey and freaked out a lot of the time, and kind of naturally lazy. So all of those things, basically just having a tendency to be kind of spacey and just kind of like jostled and freaked out and like I'm always kind of like freaked out and panicked a little bit, and then just being naturally lazy. All of those make it so I tend to make stupid mistakes, and those make me seem kind of stupid. And also just my working memory, not great working memory. Actually, I would probably even say like subpar. I would say I probably have like a below average working memory. And so all of these things basically make it so like when I wake up in the morning, I play that Simon game, and if I do some kind of like perspective drawing, it makes it so I can just barely do like a pretty decent like 3D model without making a lot of like careless mistakes, and just being able to like stay on track and not space out. And so what's my point? Basically, like when I live stream, I play those memory games and I draw, not because I'm good at, like I was thinking, like not because I'm good at them, but because I'm like mitigating some kind of weakness. And so basically I'm trying to check nobody watches this thing, right? But I'm just trying to check myself, because I'm thinking like, am I being inauthentic when I do these video things? How much of what I'm doing is showing off, and then how much of what I'm doing is just a function? Memory game and perspective drawing is really just a function, and it really does make me sculpt and do like 3D models noticeably better. Like, and it really just makes me less stupid throughout the day and just less undisciplined and spacey. Like if I don't do that shit, I just my mind wanders and I'll start browsing YouTube shit or something like that. And so what's the point, Sean? I don't know, just basically sorting out. I'm trying to just tell myself, but also just there's just a bunch of things on here which I wouldn't naturally be inclined to do, but if I do them, it kind of makes life better for me, and I'm mitigating some weaknesses. But then there's a lot of things I do on here which is all just like show off shit, like all this like, I don't know, just a lot of things I do in here is basically like I want to see, like it's kind of like showing off or something like that. What's the point? Anyway, that's it. That's sort of figured out. Anyway, nobody cares. Could you give me some sort of simple test to determine if I have a below average or above average working memory? Like maybe 3 sample questions or something like that, just so I could get a ballpark estimate of if my natural working memory is like below average or above average.
Okay, here are 3 simple tasks that can...
Okay, so I'm just curious. Digit span forward. I will read you a sequence of numbers. Immediately after I finish, try to repeat the numbers back to me in the exact same order. We will start with a short sequence and gradually increase the length. See how long of a sequence you can repeat accurately. Let's start with a sequence of 3 numbers. So sequence 1, 5, 8, 2. Can I remember 5, 8, 2? Yeah. So I'm just going to read it. 4A, 1B. Wait, I don't get it. Backwards. Oh, you're supposed to do it backwards. So, 163, 361. All right. What's like an average working memory? Like, what's something that if somebody told somebody a sequence of numbers, they should be able to remember it and not forget easily for like an average person?
For the average adult, a typical working memory span for a sequence of random digits is around 7 digits, plus or minus 2. This is often referred to as the magical number 7.
So really like 5. Like really, like if I play Duel and Back, really I'm able to remember 5. You know the game Duel and Back?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, really, like 5, I can somewhat reliably remember with consistent accuracy. 6 gets like I'm likely to say what was the number again, and then 7 is like pretty likely like phone. I actually struggle with kind of phone numbers, and so I kind of struggle with phone numbers. Like I have to kind of say the number in my head over a few times, or sometimes I have to ask again what the number is. But you said that like five could be like average working memory, but below 5 is like you got bad working memory. But 5 might be on the low end of average, right?
you're right to point that out and to be thoughtful about the nuances. While a digit span of around 7, plus or minus 2, is often cited.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that my working memory is probably on the low end of average. It's not like officially really stupid, but it's not great. It's not like really good. So what's the point, Sean? Yeah, basically, I want to be real about that. I want to be real about that, and just it's mostly always been like that, and so anyway, I'm not that smart. It's good for me to know, and just good for me to. So now, as I so I should write that down. It's basically if I'm trying to be authentic, I'm just trying to know myself. Like I'm trying to looking at the activities I do. I'm thinking like, am I like showing off or like, because a lot of things I've been doing on this live stream I've been doing for like so long. I don't even remember why I started these lifestyle sort of habits, and then a lot of them I'm going like, yeah, I'm trying to fight my weaknesses, but and then some of them I think I'm trying to show off and seem like I think that I'm good. Like sometimes when I'm doing some kind of acting thing, I'll be like, I'm good at this, but I'm really not good at it. So I'm trying to do that. Is basically like, what are you bullshitting yourself about in terms of what you're good? Like I was thinking like, I'm an abstract thinker, but really I'm not. I'm not really an abstract thinker. Not a natural inclination to a love of abstract thought in excess. Some people are just, they love to do that. It's kind of forced with me. What else? Just working memory is naturally at the lower end of average. So it's not like retarded, but it's I'd say slightly below average of like normal, but average. So it's on the low end of average. You could say it's average, but on the low end of average. Anyway, what's the point, Sean? Just worth like being real about that and saying like, all right, like within those conditions and mitigating any of those conditions, what can I do? So basically, like considering those conditions, I think I've done pretty good work, but I should acknowledge those sort of like base conditions and just be real about it and don't pretend that they're not there. Like I think sometimes people do that. They think that they're like, I'm good at something, and then they're like, oh, I'm really not good at something. And so anyway, I'm just trying to be authentic, and what else do I want to is a medication like Adderall sort of proven to slightly increase things like working memory, or even natural inclination towards abstract thought?
For individuals with diagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, medications like Adderall, a stimulant.
So, no, not more inclination toward abstract thought, but can improve working memory with people with ADD. Anyway, I took Adderall a long time ago. I just remember it made me want to talk more, and it made it so like if somebody was talking to me, I could remember what they said with greater ease. But overall, it kind of made life kind of shittier, and so I stopped taking it. Anyway, that's it. That's my little conclusions. So I accept it. So basically, like, now I'm just thinking, like, well, do I want to mitigate my weakness towards working memory by playing a little memory game, and then mitigate my weakness in abstract thought by doing a little perspective and anatomy drawing in the morning? Yes, it noticeably like carries. It makes me a little less stupid and a little less spacey throughout the day. Can you substantiate that? So I've noticed this thing where, like, if I play a memory game like Dueling Back in the morning, and then if I do some sort of like perspective analytical drawing where I draw something from imagination that has like anatomy and analyze the parts and plot it down in perspective, having to analyze it because it's in a different perspective than what I'm visually looking at, it seems like throughout the day I'm less spacey and less spacey. Like I space out less, and I have greater attention, and I think more about, like, I consider more factors before I make actions. Is there data to show that and I tend to yeah, is there data to suggest that probably works? So you say that the data suggests that those activities and their observed effects are plausible, right? Anyway, so what's the point? So it's not crazy. Like, it's probably not necessary for most people. Most people are like, I don't really space out, or I don't act illogically or have trouble focusing or just even being accurate. Basically, like, if I play Dueling Back and if I draw perspective drawing, I notice I space out less, I get distracted less, and my drawings are more accurate, and I tend to think more. I tend to be less, like, adverse to abstract thought. So anyway, it's been working. I just want to ask that one more time. So yeah, so I've noticed that for years, that like if I play Dueling Back, End Back. If I play this game called End Back, and then if I do perspective drawing, I tend to be less adverse to abstract thought. I tend to do sculptures that I do with greater accuracy, and I tend to space out less because of a lapse in working memory, and there's data to suggest that the effects from those activities that I've noticed are plausible. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway, so there's data. I'm just checking to see like how much of what I'm doing is kind of bullshit. So yeah, it says that's based on data. It's plausible that those effects I've noticed are kind of real. And so anyway, next life, I hope to be somebody who has a better working memory, and who is less adverse to abstract thought and doesn't need to do some sort of mitigation of my weaknesses to do good like work. But I really do. I notice that if I don't do it, my work is noticeably sloppier, and I make more stupid decisions, and I'm just more emotional and spacey. And so, I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep doing those games, but I'm gonna try to. I don't know. I'll sort this out over the next few months and just be like, how much of this shit that I've been doing do I even need to do? But I do want to do 6 hours of 3D modeling. But I think already today, I've been goofing off so long that I don't even think I can do 6 hours of 3D modeling before I go to sleep. It's fine. There's no urgency on it, but I'm just learning. I'm learning about authenticity, natural strengths and weaknesses, and just getting a little more authentic. At least to know like, who is the real you? Because nobody's listening, right? But I was saying this shit for like years. I was saying like, there's no soul, like there's no real you. Yeah, but there are like strengths and weaknesses that are worth being upfront about for the sake of authenticity. So although there's no evidence for a soul necessarily, when people are talking about a soul, they could be referring to like an authentic you or your true self, which could possibly translate to being upfront about your strengths and weaknesses, or just the things that you kind of like naturally gravitate towards if you weren't doing any pretense or showing off or trying to seem a certain way, right? Basically, like if no one was watching, right? So that previous statement that I said, could be true, right? All right, so that's kind of what I've been kicking around for the last few days, is basically that like I was live streaming for like a really long time, and I kept saying all this stuff about like there's no soul, there's no self, but like there is you do have natural strengths and weaknesses, and also just things that you would gravitate towards that are probably different from like what you would do if no one was watching. What sort of stuff would you do from morning till night? That's like pretty close to like an authentic you. Yeah, basically like from morning till night, the kind of activities that you would gravitate towards if no one was watching is kind of a good way to assess kind of like natural tendencies or your authenticity or something like that. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So I just want to like be honest with myself about that, and just kind of like maybe try to change my even though I live stream like all the time, I'm going to try to change my live stream stuff to be more in line with that, which basically just means like just do like perspective drawing for like an hour, and then just do 3 to 8 hours of 3D modeling. That's what I'd like to get in the habit of doing. And then if I'm doing anything else, it should just be sort of like mitigation of weaknesses, or how to have like basically have energy, or like take care of my dogs, and don't let that stuff get out of hand. Try not to do like a lot of like show off stuff, because nobody likes any of the show off stuff anyway, and it never gets good. The weaknesses are kind of like still there, and so I don't know. I'm gonna try to like stop that, because I don't really like it. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't online. Nobody else seems to like it, and so I'm gonna try to change. But I've been learning about like natural strengths and weaknesses that people tend to have, and figuring out which ones do I fall into. So anyway, no one cares, but it's kind of interesting to me.